The evening of March 26, 2003, slid toward night in a slow, honey-colored fade, the kind of sunset that made everything look softer than it really was. Linda Myers drove alone down a narrow two-lane road cutting through Dark County, Ohio, a place so rural it felt less like a location and more like an afterthought. Fields stretched flat and endless on either side, the last light pooling in the low places like something spilled and forgotten. She was 55 and bone-tired, heading home from the pizza shop she owned with her husband. Her shoulders ached the way they always did after counting money and smiling at customers she barely saw. When she turned onto the gravel road leading to their 40-acre farm, the tires crackled loud in the silence, as if the land itself were listening. The farmhouse appeared the way it always did, squat, aging, stubborn. No neighbors in sight, no passing cars, just open land and the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears. Sheep bleated somewhere in the distance, thin and uneasy, and from behind the barn came the metallic whine of power tools chewing into something old. Linda reached into the back seat and grabbed the deposit bag, heavy with the day's cash. She held it close to her chest as she stepped out, the evening air cool and smelling faintly of oil and earth. Behind the barn, Jack was bent over the open hood of a rusted car, his broad back to her, grease marking his arms like bruises. He was always working, at the plant during the day, at the shop with her, out here with his car projects until the light disappeared. He said it kept him busy. Linda sometimes wondered what he was trying not to think about. In the grass nearby sat 4-year-old Damien, turning a wrench over in his small hands like it was a toy meant just for him. When he saw Linda, his whole face opened. He ran to her, arms wide, trusting and fast. She dropped the deposit bag to one hip so she could catch him. His hug was tight, too tight for someone so little. The feeling that followed, the warmth, the ache, was always mixed. Sweet and sour, like milk just starting to turn. Damien was her great-grandson, though most days she forgot the great part. He was Amber's boy. Amber, who'd gotten pregnant at 14, still a child herself, all sharp elbows and bad decisions. Linda and Jack had stepped in when there'd been no one else steady enough to do it. They told themselves it was temporary, just until Amber grew up. But temporary had stretched into 4 years. The arrangement had never been clean. Damien's father had raged from the sidelines, furious and loud, insisting he was being shut out. Linda didn't trust men who shouted about love. She'd lived long enough to know volume didn't equal devotion. She believed, deep down, with a certainty that felt like instinct, that one day he would disappear. And she refused to let Damien be abandoned twice. Still, change was coming. Amber had finished school. She'd married a man with calm eyes and steady work. In a few months, after preschool ended, Damien would go live with them. Linda was proud of her granddaughter. She really was. But as she stood there in the falling dark, the barn humming behind her, the boy's small arms locked around her neck, she felt it again, that quiet, guilty thought. She wasn't ready to give him back. They loved him in the way people love something they know they don't get to keep. Jack barely looked up from the engine when Linda called out to him. His shoulders were tight, movements sharp, like the metal under his hands had personally offended him. She didn't push. Instead, she scooped Damien into her arms and carried him toward the house. His small fingers hooked into the collar of her shirt. Inside, the farmhouse smelled like dust and old wood, the air cooler than outside. She set Damien down and told him to wash up for dinner. He padded off obediently, socks whispering over the floor. Linda dropped the pizza shop deposit bag onto a dining room chair. It landed with a dull, heavy thud. Cash for the day. She'd take it to the bank in the morning. For now, it sat there, in plain sight, ordinary, unguarded, like nothing bad ever happened to people who lived this far from everyone else. She started dinner, the rhythm of it automatic, pan on the stove, oil, the quiet hiss of heat. When Jack came in, the smell of motor oil came with him. He scrubbed his hands at the sink, jaw tight. "How was your day?" she asked. He muttered about a customer who'd fallen behind on car payments. 3 missed installments. He'd have to go out tomorrow, take the car back. His voice was flat, but his shoulders were drawn high, like he was bracing for something. Linda knew better. It wasn't the car. It was Greg. Jack's 25-year-old son had always been the gentle one, the quiet shadow at his father's side. Best man at their wedding. The kind of boy who said, "Yes, sir," and meant it. But lately his life had been unraveling in slow, ugly threads: divorce, drinking, drugs. Missed work. Earlier that month, he'd shown up desperate, asking for money to stop the bank from taking his house. Jack had refused. Linda hadn't been there for the worst of the fight, but she'd heard enough, voices raised. Something heavy knocked over, the sound of a relationship bending in a way that might not bend back. Jack had done this before. With Travis. Another son. Another blow-up. Another silence that had stretched for 7 years and counting. She stepped behind him and rubbed his shoulders, feeling the hard knots under her hands. "He'll come around," she said gently. "You did the right thing." Quote. She hoped that was true. They ate. They cleaned up. The evening folded in on itself. Upstairs, she helped Damien into his pajamas, brushed his teeth, tucked the blankets under his chin. He smelled like soap and childhood. She kissed his forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked just the way he liked. Later, she slid into bed beside Jack. The house settled around them, wood ticking softly in the cooling air. Out here, nights were thick. No traffic, no streetlights, just darkness, pressing against the windows. They fell asleep in it. Hours later, a noise tore through the quiet, loud, sudden, wrong. Linda jerked upright, heart slamming. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw. Morning came gently, the way it always did in small towns. Soft light, church bells in the distance, the illusion that nothing truly terrible could survive daylight. At the little church preschool a mile from the farm, Ms. Harper straightened construction paper on a bulletin board and counted heads as the children shuffled in. One chair stayed empty. Damien Huffman's. She frowned but wasn't worried. His great-grandparents were busy people, always juggling jobs, businesses, responsibilities that sounded heavy when adults talked about them in low voices. Late happened. Class began. Crayons rolled. Children sang off-key. Still no Damien. An hour passed. Then the classroom door burst open. Small sneakers slapped the tile floor as Damien ran inside, breath coming in sharp, panicked pulls. His hair stuck up in damp tufts. He wore pajama bottoms, thin and wrinkled, and a long-sleeved shirt smeared with something dark and stiff. Ms. Harper's relief rose fast, and died just as quickly. No backpack, no coat, no adult behind him. She rushed to him, kneeling so her face met his. "Damien, honey, what happened?" Up close, she saw it. The brown on his shirt wasn't mud. It was dried blood. His eyes looked too big for his face. Shocked as that stretches children into something smaller and older at the same time. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, voice going soft the way you talk to wounded animals. "Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" Damien blinked at her, confused, like the question didn't make sense. Then he said, very quietly, "Their faces are melting." Quote. 15 minutes later, Sergeant Mark Whitaker drove down a narrow rural road that looked like it led nowhere anyone would choose to go. He'd been with the Darke County Sheriff's Department for years, long enough to know that strange calls from schools involving blood and children never turned into misunderstandings. They turned into paperwork that followed you home at night. The preschool teacher's words replayed in his head. 4-year-old boy, covered in blood, says his great-grandparents' faces were melting. Whitaker didn't know what that meant. He just knew it wouldn't be good. The farmhouse sat back from the road, alone in a wide bowl of fields. No movement. No dogs barking. Just the kind of stillness that made your instincts whisper before your brain caught up. The front door stood open. No obvious damage. Whitaker and his partner drew their weapons anyway and stepped inside. "Sheriff's Department," he called out. Nothing answered. The air inside felt heavy, stale. He noticed the basement door hanging open, stairs leading down into darkness, but he kept moving forward, clearing the first floor first. Kitchen. Living room, empty. Then the bedroom. They were in the bed. Jack Myers lay face down, one arm crooked beneath him. The back of his neck was torn open by a gunshot wound, dark and final. Linda lay on her back beside him. Her face was almost unrecognizable. Gunshots had torn through it. One hand was raised near her cheek, frozen mid-defense, as if she'd tried to stop the bullet with her palm. Whitaker had seen death before. This wasn't new, but the intimacy of it, the bed, the sheets, the closeness, made it feel like an interruption, not just a crime. They cleared the rest of the house. No one else. Back in the bedroom, Whitaker pulled on gloves and touched the blood on Linda's face. Still warm, still wet. Not long ago. He scanned the floor. No shell casings. The shooter had cleaned up. Hey, his partner said. On the pillow near Jack's head sat a strange bundle, quilting fabric wrapped thickly in masking tape. Whitaker lifted it carefully. A makeshift silencer. He frowned. Out here, in the middle of farmland, why bother? Then he went upstairs. The room above the murders was small, cluttered with stuffed animals and toy trucks. A child's blanket tangled at the foot of the bed. Damien's room. Understanding settled in, slow and cold. The killer hadn't used the silencer for the neighbors. They'd used it for the child. Within minutes, more deputies arrived. Outside, a forensics tech flagged Whitaker down. Footprints in the mud. A trail leading along the house to a basement window, pane pried loose, opening just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. He crouched and looked inside. Stairs leading up. Entry point. Planned. The phone line running along the siding had been cut clean through. No calls for help. Whoever did this hadn't just known the house. They'd known the people in it. A truck rolled up at the end of the road. A neighbor approached, nervous, voice tight. Around 4:30 a.m., she'd seen a minivan leaving the Myers property. Too dark to see color. But the Myers didn't own a van. Whitaker nodded, mind already working the timeline backward. Before 4:30. Before dawn. Before the boy ran. He thanked her and turned back toward the house, toward the bedroom, toward the quiet weight of two bodies and a child who had woken up in the dark and survived something he couldn't yet understand. This wasn't random. And that made it worse. There could be a dozen reasons someone would attack Linda and Jack. Revenge. A robbery. Gone wrong. Grudge. Whitaker didn't know. Yet as he circled the house, some things started to rule out obvious motives. The pizza shop deposit bag lay in the living room, untouched. Cash spilling in neat bundles. Expensive electronics sat where they had always sat, blinking silently. Robbery wasn't part of the plan. Whoever had done this hadn't needed money. They had needed something else. Upstairs, Whitaker noticed something strange in Damien's room, a tiny red stain on the bedding, dried, stubborn. Blood. Not enough to explain everything, but enough to make him pause. Meanwhile, Detective Mike Burns, assigned to the case, was at the preschool. Burns was a father himself. The moment he saw Damien, he felt that sharp, instinctive urge to protect. To reassure. The boy's eyes were wide and raw, confusion and fear tangled together in a knot that no adult could untie easily. Damien was the only witness. And maybe the only one who could tell them why this had happened. Burns got down to the child's level, sitting cross-legged on the floor of a quiet room. "Tell me what happened," he said softly. In the careful, deliberate way that only a 4-year-old can, Damien recounted the morning. He'd woken up around 8:45, the house unnervingly quiet. Curious, he went to his great-grandparents' room. They were in bed, sleeping, he thought, until he tried to wake them. They didn't move, and there was blood on their faces. He had tried to wipe it away with a Kleenex, but there was too much. Something was very, very wrong. For a moment, he thought their faces were melting. He ran the full mile to school. Burns noted the clarity with a mix of awe and horror. The boy remembered everything, except one piece didn't fit: blood in his own bedroom. "Did you go back into your room after seeing Grandma and Grandpa?" Burns asked. "No," Damien said. "I went straight outside." Quote, something didn't add up. Burns pulled over a dollhouse. Toys could tell truths that words sometimes couldn't. Damien placed a small figure in the bedroom upstairs, himself. He put other figures in the bed representing Jack and Linda. Everyone went to sleep, just like normal. Then, in the middle of the night, the boy said, the bedroom door opened. Someone came inside. Who? Burns asked gently. Damien paused. Then, softly, the green monster. Quote. Burns frowned, unsure at first. A nightmare, perhaps. But Damien's small hands moved. The toys again. Across the floor of the dollhouse, the figure representing the green monster crept toward his bed. I opened my eyes, Damien whispered. Just a little, but I pretended I was asleep. Quote. The figure was right there, pointing a gun. I shut my eyes, Damien said. When I opened them again, it was gone. Quote. Burns swallowed, stomach twisting. This wasn't a dream, not likely. The boy had seen whoever killed his great-grandparents. The green monster. After the preschool, Burns's next stop was Amber Holshire's house. She was 19, young, and probably still trying to figure out how to be a mother while barely being an adult. Herself. Her house was small, ordinary, sun falling unevenly across the lawn. He rang the doorbell. She answered immediately, confused but polite. Nobody had told her, yet, nobody had prepared her for what was coming. Can I come inside? Burns asked gently. We need to speak. Quote. Okay, she said, still uncertain. They sat in the living room. Burns chose his words carefully. Your grandparents, Linda, and Jack Myers, they're no longer with us. Quote. Amber's eyes went wide. What do you mean? Where are they? He inhaled slowly. They're deceased. Quote. The words landed like a hammer. Amber froze for a heartbeat, then stammered, Is Damien? No, Burns said quickly. He's safe, but he's in protective custody for now. Until we figure out who did this, he can't be around anyone, not even family. Quote. The air seemed to shiver around her as tears began. Burns felt awful for her, but Damien's safety pressed against his mind with sharper weight. Every hour this case remained unsolved was another hour the boy spent alone in fear. Once Amber's sobs subsided, Burns asked about anyone who might have wanted to hurt her grandparents. She nodded immediately. Damien's father, Andrew Huffman. Amber's words spilled out fast. He hated Linda for keeping him from Damien, had confronted her at the pizza shop recently, even threatened her life in public. Burns filed it away. Threats, motive, proximity. He thanked Amber and promised to stay in touch. Back in his car, he called Sergeant Whitaker. Later that day, Whitaker and his partner drove 2 hours to Newport, Kentucky. Andrew answered quickly, inviting them inside, expression flat, unreadable. Linda and Jack were murdered, they told him, watching for any flicker, any break. Andrew blinked, surprise. But no grief, no fear, just cold distance. He admitted he didn't get along with Amber's family. When asked about the pizza shop confrontation, he didn't deny the threat, swore it was empty, words in heat, not action. Still, his eyes and posture screamed caution to Whitaker. Alibi. Where were you the night of the murder? At a girl's house, Andrew said. Then my dad's. Then straight to work in the morning. You can check. Quote. They did. Girl's house. Father's house. Workplace. All confirmed. Every detail lined up. No gap. No window for 2 hours of murder driving to Ohio. Whitaker leaned back. The lead had gone cold. Another day lost. Another day Damien spent alone, trapped in protective custody, waiting for someone, anyone, to make sense of this nightmare. Me one to come by. Family members are always suspects, right? Burns stepped into the living room and froze. Another young man stood in the doorway. Same dark hair, the same jawline, the same hollow eyes. That's my brother, Greg said. Travis. Quote. Burns blinked. Luck, or fate, or something far more sinister. He had come looking for Travis. And here he was, standing in Greg's house like he belonged. Greg explained that Travis had been back in Ohio for several weeks, renting an apartment nearby. Burns didn't like it. The timing was convenient. Too convenient. Almost perfect. Like a page in a thriller he didn't want to be part of. And now both brothers were here, waiting. Waiting for the police. Too calm. Too convenient. Too much. Trusting his instincts, Burns told them both they needed to come to the station for formal questioning. Less than an hour later, he led them through the doors of the dark county sheriff's office. Neither brother was under arrest yet, but Burns had the creeping sense that one or both wouldn't walk out of there the same. He sat Greg down in his office while his partner took Travis down the hall. Greg avoided eye contact, shifty, tense, and small movements, the body language of someone carrying a weight he couldn't articulate. Burns leaned back and studied him. He didn't need words yet. The room was already thick with suspicion. Greg was willing to tell the detectives anything, if it could help solve the murders of his father and stepmother. Burns leaned forward, pen ready, listening. "What were you doing early Thursday morning?" he asked. "Mostly sleeping," Greg said. "Until about 4:30. Then I got up to drive to my job at a factory a few towns over. My girlfriend was home the whole night. She can vouch for me." Quote, "He drove his minivan, clocked in at 5:23 a.m., and even had a signed time card at home to prove it." Burns's mind ticked. The neighbor had said a minivan left the Myers farm around 4:30 a.m. The killer. A minivan. Convenient, but impossible. Even if Greg had been guilty, the timing made it physically implausible. Drive from his house, commit the murders, then get to work and clock in on time. Not enough minutes in the world. Greg was close to Jack and Linda. He had his vices, drugs, alcohol, but no history of violence. No one in the family thought he could kill them. Greg remained a suspect, but Burns shifted focus to Travis. How did Travis react when he heard? Burns asked. "Upset," Greg said, mostly worried about him. Greg had been closer to Jack and Linda. Travis had been estranged, 7 years without speaking to their father, all bad blood. The fight had been about the farm. Business disputes. Travis felt cheated, left the business in a storm of anger, and moved away. Burns made mental notes. Check Greg's alibi, check Jack's will. Inheritance was motive enough. After a brief pause, Greg was moved to another room, and Burns went down the hall to Travis. From the start, Travis seemed nervous, eyes flicking, fingers fidgeting. "Why are you back in Ohio?" the detective asked. "Re-evaluating my life. Wanted to meet Greg's kids," Travis stammered. "What about the night of the murders?" "I was asleep in my apartment," Travis said. "Anyone who can confirm that?" Travis hesitated, then shook his head. "Detective, do you have a car?" Travis. "My mom's, a white minivan." Quote, Burns's stomach tightened. 2 brothers, 2 minivans. Convenient timing. All roads leading somewhere. Back in his office, Burns reviewed evidence. Forensics results weren't back yet, only 24 hours in, but he had to act. The killer was almost certainly someone close. Someone who knew the house, knew Damien. And now the minivan detail meant either Travis or Greg could have been the shooter. Then the phone rang. A local man on the line said he had information. Days earlier, his friend had asked him where they could buy a gun. When pressed why, the friend said, to shoot Jack Myers. Quote, the man gave a name. Burns knew instantly. Everything clicked. Based on this call and the forensic evidence, here's what police believe happened on the morning of March 27, 2003. The killer woke early, slipped into a green hunting jumpsuit, packed a bag with duct tape, trash bags, masking tape, latex gloves on, a 12-gauge shotgun, purchased through a classified ad just 2 days prior, was loaded and ready. Every step, every detail, calculated. Every piece of the Myers' lives known and anticipated. The house was about to become a trap. Got it? Now we're at the full reveal and conclusion, which is the ultimate payoff for Flynn-style suspense. The killer's meticulous plan, their internal tension, and the final twist of the perpetrator being someone close. The key is to keep the psychological tension and the creeping dread, while maintaining the chilling, almost clinical tone of the crime unfolding. Here's the Gillian Flynn-style rewrite of this final section. They carried their supplies to the minivan like soldiers preparing for a mission. Every piece of tape, every bag, every glove was carefully packed. The green hunting jumpsuit felt tight. Suffocating, but necessary. They climbed into the driver's seat and drove through the dark fields, the air heavy and still. The moonlight glinting off the gravel road. Calm at first, but when they turned onto the road leading to Jack and Linda's farm, their heart began to pound. Every step had been planned. Every contingency accounted for. All that remained was control. Stick to the plan. Outside the farmhouse, they paused. In the backseat of the van, the shotgun came out. Thick quilting fabric wrapped around the barrel, masking tape securing it in place. A homemade silencer. Their hands shook, betraying their nerves. They had planned this, but they hadn't wanted it. Not really. Slung over the shoulder, the weapon felt heavy with inevitability. They crept to the side of the house, cut the phone lines, pried open the basement window, and climbed in. Up the stairs, first floor, straight to the bedroom. Jack and Linda lay sleeping. A deep breath, a single pull of the trigger. The shotgun roared. The silencer tore off, landing on the pillow next to Jack's head. Chaos erupted. Linda woke, eyes wide, hand raised in defense. Panic blurred judgment. 2 more blasts, through her hand, then her face. Silence, then stillness. But one problem remained. Damien, upstairs. The child they hadn't wanted to touch. They crept into his room. Little Damien lay under the covers, eyes shut, feigning sleep. Relief washed over them. Lowering the shotgun, they left the room, shutting the door quietly. Behind them, back in the minivan, the world outside still dark and empty. A few miles away, they stopped. On a bridge, gun, supplies, jumpsuit, all gone, sinking into the river. Changed into work clothes. Clocked in at 5:23 a.m. at the factory. Timing perfect. The killer, Greg Myers, Jack's younger son. Money, drugs, desperation, resentment. He knew the farm would pass to him one day. When his father refused help, when confrontation failed, he saw only one path. Police later confirmed it. Timing was possible, supplies were traced, fingerprints matched, and footprints linked to Greg's shoes. Evidence from the river, receipts, all pointing to him. Within 48 hours, he was arrested. Convicted of double murder, life without parole. Damien survived. In the end, he went to live with his mother, Amber. 4 years old and yet a witness to the unthinkable. But as of a 2021 documentary, he is doing well, resilient in the face of horrors no child should ever see.